Are you going to become a billionaire one day? I would say almost certainly, but that's not the goal. When you're involved in like STEM and stuff like that, it's almost like hard not to become wealthy, I would say. And then when you're like at least hardcore, STEM, and that's your goal if you couple the two. And then if you sort of I don't know. For me, I don't know. To me, again, the goal is not so much, is it this number or that number? Because if your whole life is spent chasing a number, I think you're going to have a really sorry, sad life. I watched this interview with John Carmack just over the last couple days. It's 5 hours long with Lex Friedman, and Lex talked with Carmack about a lot of stuff. But Carmack created the video game called Doom, which was and Wolfenstein 3D, which basically created the first person shooter genre, which we still enjoy today, 40 years later. And to me, I mean, what a life, right? I mean, the guy's very rich too, but he's not as rich as Elon Musk or something like that. But what a great life, what an amazing set of accomplishments. And if you think about some anonymous billionaire who's richer than John Carmack, I could name you 50 of them. You've never heard of them, and none of them have had a bigger impact on the world than John Carmack. Who would you idolize more or think had a better life or whatever? Like, and again, assuming you know nothing about their family lives, I think that's pretty obvious to me. So I certainly have gotten old enough and wealthy enough that I'm not focused on optimizing for money. I think that's something it just sort of tends to hit you in the face if you're doing your job well in the STEM world. And I think that's what happened with Carmack, right? He was a programmer. He was so good at what he did. He created a lot of important things. Oculus is another one of them that he helped sort of create, in addition to id Software. So the point is, like, you can't help but, being a partner at id Software, he wasn't even the main business person or anything like that. And then sort of with Oculus too. I mean, the guy just made hundreds of millions of dollars by accident. Not by accident, of course, but just being at the seat of the table, at having a seat at the table. So I think it just tends to come with the territory in tech.
I have a question.
Yeah.
About like meta, VR, and everything. What do you think will become the tipping point when VR becomes just like unstoppable, like an actual huge market? Because it doesn't feel like it's quite there yet.
Yeah,
Like
it's a
I
really good
have
question.
plans.
It actually may. Yeah, obviously like all open-ended questions. There's a wide variety of possibilities. It's possible it never happens is probably the most interesting part there, because Carmack was actually saying this on his, and remember, this is the guy who helped bring Oculus to bear. Um, I don't know if you have more to that question, or do you want to go mute? It's up to you.
No, I was gonna say was just a lot of what I saw in Quest is essentially just oh it's CS:GO but VR, or oh it's Subnautica but VR. A lot of it feels like there's not a lot of creativity in the space.
Right,
This is how limited it is.
right, exactly. I think that's actually really important point as well, and sort of a sub point. I think the way I look at this question is like reductio ad absurdum. Like, let's start with the outcomes and then work our way to the forefront. So there's the obvious outcome of like Ready Player One or something like that, where everybody's wearing one of these things all the time and we're wired in and so forth. Then there's the opposite outcome where nobody uses the stuff, which is basically where we're at now. The actual installed base is really low. Most people don't spend much time on it if they have one, and it's just sort of a parlor trick at the moment. And then there's something in between where maybe everyone has one but don't spend much time in it, or maybe just let's say business people have it, or artists, or some specialized group of people have it. That's possible as well. And I think that the fact that you know two of those scenarios are not that interesting, right? The one that's really interesting is the possibility it never catches on, and that's the thing that would worry any investor or any person working in that space. Is, okay, what if this is just a forever sort of rabbit hole that nobody will ever enjoy? And so far, there's no evidence to prove it'll be the opposite, right? So far, that's what it's been. And it's funny because Carmack said, when Snow Crash came out, we were talking about the metaverse when it came out, right? People were talking about that. It wasn't like this isn't a new idea. Now, maybe its time has come. Maybe its time is perpetually 5 years away, or maybe it's literally just 5 years away, or maybe it's 5 months away. We'll see. I can't tell you for sure. But I do think like the software is definitely one of the problems. And if you look at the history of computing, the software drives the hardware. If you have great software, somebody looks over your shoulder and says, "Wow, I wish I had that at home." Whether it's Microsoft Excel or at the time, it's Lotus 123 or whatever, VisiCalc, the first spreadsheet softwares before Excel. People look at that software and say, "Oh, wow, John has VisiCalc at his company. Why don't we have it to do our accounting?" and stuff like that. Software will tend to drive that. And Doom probably sold more PCs and evangelized PCs than any any actual productivity software ever did. So I think like it is all about the software, and it's really hard to show off VR software, right? It's kind of like something you have to experience and describe. I think people do a good job of that. Beat Saber is one of those killer apps where that's happened, but you also have a ton of other issues that still need to be solved. Form factor, VR sickness, lots of issues here. So AR is probably better baby step toward VR, but we just don't know for sure. I mean, it's one of these things where the future is always difficult to predict. And I wish the best for people in AR and VR, but I also think like, are there more terrestrial kind of like bets where you don't have to go wrong? For example, where you don't need a lot to go right. For example, if I wanted to start an AR or VR software company tomorrow, I'm making two implicit bets. I'm making the first implicit bet that AR and VR is going to work with or without me, right? Because I don't think my software company, despite what I just said, is likely to really bend the curve of the future. Now, the other option is, so the other point is that my own software company has to work. So both have to work. I can be running the best software company ever, but if AR and VR adoption doesn't take place, I lose. And vice versa. AR and VR adoption might take place, but I also, of course, have to have my company succeed. That's not the case in pharma, for instance, where pharma is a big market. You don't have to wait on people to take medicine. People are taking medicine. You just have to run a good pharmaceutical company. The same thing applies in oil. The same thing applies in consumer. The same thing applies in everything that's not a brand new industry. So I tend not to like investing in brand new industries that are like still not at critical mass and stuff like that. At the same time, of course, you can't be early, so to speak. But if there's a way to have one's cake and eat it too, I try to do something like that. But for me, I think AR and VR is too early. It's too risky. Metaverse software is a bit different, right, in a sense, because ultimately we've been doing metaverse software for 40 years or longer. We just don't think of it like a metaverse, but this is needless to say a metaverse. Discord's a metaverse. All this stuff is very metaversey. So I really think that that is a place that I like. Groups online is something I've been doing since personal computers came out, and I think it's whether it's Telnet or IRC or really old protocols like that, or things like this that are cutting edge, and the things coming in the future. People love to get together online, share information, joke, laugh, fall in love, God knows what.